Today we're going to be turning this 11 ingredients into a nice curry, starting with our spice mix, a tomato puree, some ghee, some chopped chilies, some minced ginger or grated ginger, some minced or grated garlic, some Icelandic skyr, frozen spinach, lamb or mutton, chopped onion and chopped tomatoes. The first thing you're going to want to do is put your spinach into your pan on a medium heat to defrost it and get some of the moisture driven out of the spinach. Next up, you're going to want to put your ghee onto a high heat pan, purely to melt all the solids within there so that you can actually start to properly cook the following ingredients. Here I'm just scraping the last bits out because it's all carefully measured. First things first, the grated ginger. That goes in. Now people will say it can burn, but if you're good and you're careful, it won't burn, but it will spit at you. Learn from my lesson, turn the heat down just a smidge. You'll see here I'm going to start to stir it, and then it's literally going to start spitting at me in about 3, there we go. See, before I even got 3, 2, 1, it started spitting. Next up, add your ginger. Now, you should turn the heat down for this because ginger burns faster than garlic. So turn the heat down as I've just done here and keep everything moving. If you keep it moving, it doesn't have a chance to spit at you. So once you've got it all moving, move on to the next part, which is your spice mix. Now the spice mix ingredients are listed below, but add them to the pan to make sure that they toast up properly. You want them to become very fragrant. Now if you're using the whole spices, grind them in a pestle and mortar or use a spice grinder, but I only had the powders to hand, but fresh spices would have been a lot better. But use what you have. That's what this recipe is about, making use of what you've got. Now keep everything moving so you don't burn the spices. You just want them gently toasted and warmed through in the ghee. So as you can see here, I'm just constantly keeping it moving. I will spread it out just a little bit, and then from there I will keep it moving. Spread it out, move, spread it out, move, spread it out, move. That toasts everything and that keeps everything in check, ready for the next part, which is the tomato puree. Now you'll want the tomato puree in purely to cook out the harshness and the rawness of the flavour. Now I probably should have used a spoon to start with this. I realised as I was going, so out comes a spoon and there we go. I add the rest of it into the pan and get it moving. That's the key to this game. With a curry, you keep everything moving so you don't burn it, and the spice mix will blend in nicely with the tomatoes and you'll get a nice little paste coming and forming. Once again, you'll see that I'm spreading everything out and then stirring, spreading out and stirring, trying to make sure that the tomato puree is mixed in with all the spices and herbs and the garlic and the ginger and everything else. Next up, the green chilies. Now warning, this will make your eyes go a bit funny and it will catch the back of your throat. Certainly did for me, but then that's just life, I guess. If you use a hotter chili than just your standard green chili, be warned, it will be a worse thing to do. You're obviously going to have a higher temperature in terms of spice, but then you do what you want to do. It's your curry, you make it how you want to make it. This is how I make it, and 2 chilies is just about right for me. Here you will want to add your onions after you've stirred for about 2 to 3 minutes, and you want to make sure that your onions are quite evenly coated with the spice mixture. Make sure you stir them thoroughly and coat every last onion. Now the onions don't have to be finely diced. A rough chop will do in this instance. It's exactly what I did. It's just a rough chop so they're in quite small pieces. Turn up the temperature just a little bit to help cook out the onion, and if you feel that the spice mix is getting a bit dry, do add a splash of water. I certainly did throughout the cooking of this, just because I felt it was going to burn rather than it was going to cook and fry nicely. You could add more butter or ghee if you wish, but I don't recommend that. But as I said, just add some water, it'll stop it from scorching. If you've got hot water fresh from the kettle, that makes it actually easier on the pan. You're not losing any temperature, you're just literally adding boiling water to a very hot pan just to loosen things up. Now that you've stirred and coated your onions for quite a few minutes, next up you'll want to add in your lamb or your mutton, and you'll want to coat this and brown this quite thoroughly so that everything is incorporated. This can take anywhere up to about 10 minutes. As you can see, I've been stirring the meat and it's quite well coated now with the mixture. I've added a splash more water to help this coat through properly, but I'm looking for the parts that have got things like bone marrow. So as you can see, the bone marrow there has just been turned over so that the bone marrow can actually melt into the dish. This helps give it added flavour, and as Guga says, it is butter of the gods, and it is, especially in a dish like this where it will help to add flavour to your dish. As you can see, I've now broken down some of the spinach from its frozen state, and I'm still stirring the curry through. You want to make sure that the spinach is stirred every so often because you're going to add this mix to it soon enough. This is going to go in to the big pot, and you want to make sure your pot is deep enough also, but you want to just make sure all your meat is nicely coloured. Any of the bone marrow, as you can see there, I'm just poking it out and turning it back over. Any of that is going to come out, and here I'm actually going to show you what the bone marrow kind of looks like. It's pink, it's gelatinous, and it will melt after a little while, so just make sure you do scrape it out if you need to. Once again, stirring the spinach, breaking down any parts that still might be frozen, and then just letting it continue to sizzle away and get rid of some of the moisture. So now it's been bubbling away for another 10 minutes here. You just want to make sure you add your tomatoes in quite towards the end of the stage. You want to do that because if they're cooking for too long in the curry like this, they will become bitter. So make sure you've added them in. It adds additional liquid to the stock that you're cooking with, and just make sure you stir them thoroughly throughout the dish. That is, make sure it is key you stir thoroughly throughout the dish. Just furthering on, make sure you break down your spinach as well. You can see it's still steaming in the background there. Any bits of loose bone marrow that are still within the bones, make sure you pop them out and just continually stir. The aim of the game on this one is to stir. Stir, stir, stir. Now that you've been stirring this for another 10 minutes or so, after you've added the tomatoes and additional water, it's time to mix it in with the spinach. Doing so like this, making sure not all of the water has thawed out from the spinach, allows you to draw out more moisture and actually incorporate the spinach better into the dish. Just make sure you get every last drop out of the pan whilst you're transferring it over. Now you've got everything in the same pan, you just want to make sure that you thoroughly combine everything. Pull up the spinach from the bottom of the pan and stir, making sure you add all of the liquid and make sure it's combined evenly throughout the dish. And just make sure that you have the cooking temperature onto a medium-high heat here. You actually do want to drive off some more of the moisture. As you can see, there's quite a bit of water towards the back of the pan. That's okay for now, but this needs to be a bit of a drier curry. So you just keep mixing and stirring, mixing and stirring. Now that the moisture has evaporated off, or a large part of it is, you'll want to be adding in your skyr or yogurt in batches. You want to add it in slowly so that you make sure it doesn't split. You probably should turn down the heating at this point on the stove, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure you add it in bits at a time. I broke it down into 2 to 3 additions to the curry, making sure to stir through evenly before adding the next part. Doing this, as I said, prevents it from splitting, and when it splits it gets a very grainy texture which is not pleasant in the mouth, and it actually also releases the whey that is remaining from the dairy product, which can then just give you milk solids and then whey, which is again not very nice to be having as a mouthfeel. It's been stirred now for another 10 minutes, and as you can see, the colour has changed quite significantly. You just want to keep doing this to drive off the last little bits of that moisture. As I said, this is quite a dry curry, but you just want to make sure you drive off that bit of moisture. If you want to have it, that's fine, but it does detract from the flavour overall. Just want to show you what the curry should actually look like. A lot of the moisture has been driven off, as you can see here. It is quite dry overall, and the colour is quite a deep and rich colour. The more spinach you add, the more green it's going to be. The less you add, the less green it's going to be. But overall, this is the sort of colour and consistency you are looking for. You'll want to plate this up with a rice of your choice. In this instance, I am using cauliflower rice, and I am measuring out the portions. Now this should give you approximately 4 portions, weighing out roughly 300 grams each. At the end of the video I will put the macros, and it'll be in the comments as well, but make sure you weigh out the portions. If you're doing this to be keto friendly or ketovore friendly, you'll want to make sure you track those macros accurately. So that's the dinner, all nicely served up and ready to be demolished, and let me tell you, it was delicious. Now to studio me. So afterthoughts, what would I do different, what would I not? Well, first things first, I would probably add a little bit less of the dairy products, a little bit less skyr, just because I did think it was overpowering on the spice. Now flavour wise it complemented well, but it could have done with a bit more of a kick of the curry flavour. If you like more spice, add less skyr. If you like less spice, add more skyr. Just be sure to adjust your macros accordingly. Next up, about half an hour of this dish was spent just stirring and making sure everything was good. I would recommend putting this into a slow cooker. Do everything up to the tomatoes as you've seen on the video, and then add it into a slow cooker and let it simmer away with additional about 100 mils of water. Let it simmer away in a slow cooker on a low setting for about 6 to 8 hours. That will make the meat fall off the bone tender, quite literally. I didn't do that because I was in a bit of a rush for the dinner, and it still tasted great, but it could have done definitely with being in the slow cooker. But that's a lesson learned. You don't have to learn that lesson because I'm giving it to you here. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for being here, thank you for watching, and do give me ideas on what I can do next. Stick around for more on the channel. Next up will be a adobo recipe, beef or pork or chicken, as yet undecided. Stay tuned for more, and don't forget to like and subscribe.